Okay, so today we have a very unique podcast here. We have some friends here. We were talking earlier to discuss the importance of the NBA and the greatest players of all time. That's what we're going to talk about. It has nothing to do with faith, nothing to do with religion, no discussion. But in all seriousness, I've been looking forward to this for a while. I know it's a bit of a sensitive setup to have it like this. We discussed it was supposed to be a different couple different individuals, brothers from your end coming in, and then Mohammed Hijab and I had a call together. We had a Zoom. He had some challenges, and I got to give shout out to Eddie, the Dean Show. He's here with us as well, but he's sitting outside to have the discussion for us to be here together. Robert, I respect all of you for coming out. Truly, I respect you for coming out. My outcome, I want to first share with you and the audience what my outcome of this is. So as a father of four, I'm a little bit concerned on what's going on with the country in America. I escaped Iran. We went to Germany at a refugee camp, then we came here. I now have 4 kids, and I love America. I think this is an incredible nation. It's changed my life. But some of the things that's going on right now, it's kind of weird. It's strange. It's not normal. It doesn't seem normal to me. And I have friends. I'm a Christian myself. I'm a non-denominational Christian. People know that's my position. But I have a lot of friends that are Muslims. I have Scientologist friends. I have Mormon friends. I have Jews, who are here with us as well. So I wanted to bring this up because we're going to discuss a few different things today. Number one is the differences in the religion of Christianity and Muslim. We'll discuss that. And then we'll discuss the enemy. Who is the enemy to Christians? Who is the enemy to Muslims? And then we're going to share who our common enemies are. And some funny questions I want to ask you. We'll have some levity here as well to enjoy the discussion. And then there'll be an opportunity for you guys to also discuss with each other. This is not a debate. This is a discussion. Of course, there's going to be moments of debate and you giving your point of view. That's going to happen no matter what. Naturally, the setting is where that is going to happen. But I want to make sure everybody knows that's my outcome. I think there is an area where if we can find common enemies, the enemy's greater than we think. At the end, that's my outcome. But with that being said, let me properly introduce everybody. So first, we have Daniel Harirajou. I said it 7 times properly, and then when we're on, I can't. So Daniel Harirajou attended Harvard University, where he majored in physics and philosophy. He is a Sunni Muslim debater who specializes in debating anti-Muslim figures. He founded MuslimSkeptic.com and teaches Islam at mosques and universities around the world. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Patrick.
And he has a book here as well, The Modernist Menace to Islam. We'll put the link below as well, Rob, so if people want to pick it up, they can. And then we have Jake Brancatella, right, who is here with us. I was telling him earlier, I'm used to that last name more often with some of the friends we interview. He is the Muslim metaphysician, is a convert to Islam. He holds a BA in philosophy and is currently studying for a master's in philosophy and theology. Jake primarily debates Christians and atheists and is an active member of the Muslim Debate Initiative. Then we have Brother Rashid here to my right. He wrote a book called The Ideology Behind Islamic Terrorism, a Moroccan Christian convert and the host of the Daring Questions television program, where he discusses Christianity and engages with Islamic theology and religious topics. Brother Rashid, thanks you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not least, Robert Spencer, American author and commentator known for his writings of Islam, counterterrorism, and his involvement with the organizations like Jihad Watch, the most popular blog within the counter-jihad movement. He's also written The Truth About Muhammad. He's written a Critical Quran, and also his latest book that's, I think, is that the Critical Quran you have out here?
Quran.
And he's written a few other things. Rob, again, once again, thank you for being here as well. So what I'd want to do is, before we get started, and I have some comments and questions here, if you, just for some of the audience that maybe they don't know the whole story, we can start off with anyone on how you came about your current position right now. If you can take 30 seconds to a minute, giving your background, and then we'll go from there. So we're going to start off with you. Robert, how did you go? I've read your story. Of course, I know your background. I watch a lot of commentary on you. How did you become the person that you are today?
Well, you know how one thing leads to another. And I was fascinated with Islam and the Islamic world from a very early age because my grandparents actually are from the Ottoman Empire. They were Greek Orthodox Christians in what is now Turkey and were exiled during World War I for not converting to Islam. When I knew them, actually, my grandmother was the only person besides Barack Obama who said that who said that the call to prayer the Islamic call to prayer was the most beautiful sound that she had ever heard. And she would tell me stories about growing up in Turkey and how wonderful it was and how beautiful the land was, how wonderful the people were, and so on. And so then I would ask the inevitable question. I was, 5 years old or whatever. Well, then why are you here? Why did you leave? And then they would clam up and not tell me. So this just made me more interested.
Interesting.
Started to study it, consulted with people, ended up consulting with some people in the 90s about these issues. And then after 9/11 was asked to write a book. And now I've written 27 books, mostly on this issue.
And I watch you where you have a certain level of true 100% belief in what you're talking about. We'll get into that here in a minute. And I'm sure we'll get more about that. Brother Rashid, how about yourself?
Yes, I grew up in Morocco. My dad was an imam for a mosque, and I was Muslim like every other Moroccan. At age of 12, I was listening to a radio program. That's when I heard about Christianity, and I started comparing between Islam and Christianity. I was fascinated with the person of Jesus in the Gospels, and I was shocked with the life of Muhammad when I compared it to the life of Jesus. Then I converted at age of 16, 17. Then I had to leave my family, actually. They rejected me. I lived as a homeless for 2 years, and I had to live underground with the Moroccan church, the converts, until 2005, I had to flee the country.
2005, you have to flee the country.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll get into your stories well a little bit more when topics come up. Jake, how about yourself? What's your story? What's your background?
Yeah, so I was raised a Roman Catholic. My entire family is Roman Catholic up until today. I personally never really believed in the religion, primarily because the theology never really made much sense to me. As I grew older in my late teens and going into the university years, I naturally, the mind starts to think about the deeper questions in life. What's the purpose of life? Does God exist? What religion is true? And so I went on this search and eventually found the path of Islam, primarily because I believe that it's the only religion today that truly supports pure monotheism. I know that Christians, and maybe we'll get into this in the discussion, claim to be, but I found doctrines like the Trinity and incarnation to be completely incoherent and found problems with them. And the Islamic narrative of there being one and only true God that is worthy of worship and that he sent prophets and messengers with this consistent message throughout time was very inviting to me and fit with my natural disposition, and I became a Muslim in my early 20s about 10 years ago and been Muslim ever since.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Daniel, how about yourself?
Yeah, my background is my parents came from Iran. They're both from Shiraz. I was born in the U.S. actually and was raised here in Houston, Texas. And I love my parents, and they raised me like an Iranian, had a strong Iranian Persian identity. As I was in high school and then college, I started to become more religious, like learning about my background from my grandparents, for example, from my dad. And I just became more religious, started practicing Islam. I became Sunni, so I'm from a Shia background. I became Sunni. And in college, I went to Harvard University. There was a lot of pressure on Muslims at that time because of like the war on terror, counterterrorism efforts. And there was this effort to liberalize Islam and to say that traditional Islam or the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, their teachings are not consistent with modern life, with modernism and liberal secularism. And this posed a conflict for me. Like, how do I reconcile a traditional Islam with liberalism, secularism, and these modern ideologies? So I went and studied philosophy, and I became critical of these ideologies like modern liberal secularism, humanism, atheism, these isms, and that's, the title of my book, basically, or a subtitle of my book, is critiquing these isms that I believe, and through my study, they're destroying humanity. Not just Islam, but just all of humanity is under threat from these isms that are destroying human society. I hope we can talk about that today. But I dedicated my career basically to promoting this message, teaching Islam, teaching how Islam solves many of the problems and difficulties that all people face in society, not just Muslims.
I love that. Okay, thank you for that. Again, gentlemen, thank you for sharing your background. So let's get right into it. Robert, your challenge. What is your biggest challenge with the religion of Islam? What's your biggest challenge with it?
You mean the biggest difficulty I see in it?
I would say the biggest difficulty, because to me, I see it from a few different places, right? One, there's faith, meaning none of us have gone to heaven to see what heaven's going to look like. We're all taking a risk. All of us here are taking a risk. Either we're all going to be right, either we're all going to be wrong, or either one of us is going to be right, meaning one group's going to be right and the other's going to be wrong. But we don't know. That's faith, that's prayer. Of course, we've had great experiences in life to say, I had a connection with God. I had a moment with ... And then that's individual to us, right? So to me, it's faith, it's religion, it's enemies, it's common enemies. It's the challenges that's going on in the world, specifically with America as being, for the longest time, the greatest country in the world. What is affecting that? And then there's a few other things that we'll talk about into as well. So, but for me, it's more from the standpoint of when you've said you've read the Quran dozens of times. You've studied it, you've written about it, you've talked about it. Even I think the government used 2 of your books in 2011 that Wire talked about, right? I don't know what the 2 books were. I think one of them was about Prophet Muhammad and, So your background, you've been in this world. What is your biggest challenge and differences with the religion of Islam?
Well, probably the main thing is the sanctification of violence and the idea that God will bless and even calls upon the believers to commit acts of violence under certain circumstances. Like Rashid here is an ex-Muslim, and so under Islamic law, as it's traditionally and classically formulated, he would be put to death. Muhammad said, anybody who changes his religion, kill him. And it's still the position of all of the schools of Islamic jurisprudence, Sunni and Shia, that the apostate should be put to death. Now, obviously, this is not something that means that every apostate has to always go around watching himself, because you have to have somebody who's willing to do that. But those who do it, they think, well, now I have done something that Allah has commanded, and He will bless me for doing it. And me, myself, because I was standing up for the freedom of speech, 2015, Pamela Geller and I put on in Texas a Muhammad art exhibit and cartoon contest. And it was actually, we featured a lot of classic Shiite Persian art depicting Muhammad, as well as contemporary art that was from a more critical standpoint. And a couple of jihadis came from Phoenix, key members, actually, of the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix. One of them was featured in a recruitment video for them, and they tried to kill us. And so I actually would be also under a death sentence just for drawing Muhammad and for sponsoring people who do, which I did not in order to cause gratuitous insult, but to defend the freedom of speech and freedom of expression, which is the foundation of any genuinely free society.
Daniel, what would you say to that? What's your response to that?
Yeah, so just a few points here. Number one, it's interesting how we want to talk about Islam as a religion, but the religion is 95%, like what Jake mentioned. It's about worshiping God, being devoted to a righteous way of life, loving your neighbors, taking care of your parents. That's what 95% of Islam is about. Yes, there are criminal punishments, which we're going to discuss. There is conquest, there is war theory, there's all of this in Islam. But it's interesting how when a conversation is about Islam, we focus on that 5% instead of the 95% of what Islam is about. We don't see this kind of double standard with like Christians. So if you have someone like Matt Walsh is a traditional Christian. There's slavery in the Bible, there's punishment for blasphemers in the Bible, there's killing of heretics in the church tradition. There's no discussion of that with Matt Walsh, right? Or Ben Shapiro. There is killing of blasphemers in the Hebrew Bible. There is, punishments for apostasy in the Talmud. There's no discussion of that with Ben Shapiro. You can talk about, other values, and that's what the discussion focuses on. But the Islamophobic narrative is just lasering in on these specific topics, which is fine. We can discuss that, but I just want to note the double standard. So the other framing of this whole discussion that I want to put out here, though, is that I'm wondering, like, this standard of, there should be no punishment for blasphemy, for example. Let's just put that out there. There should be no punishment for mocking and insulting a religion, attacking people's values. Is that coming from a Christian perspective? Is that coming from is that coming from the church tradition? Is that coming from the Bible? Because when we look at the Bible, we see in Leviticus, we see in Deuteronomy that blasphemers should be put to death. Even if you entice, the Bible says, if you entice like your son or your daughter or your wife entices you to worship other than God, then have no mercy. Put them to death without due process mentioned, without any kind of court or tribunal. The husband or the father should just immediately put them to death without mercy. That's what the Bible says. So when Robert wants to criticize Islam, I'm wondering, is that criticism on the basis of the Bible? Is that on the basis of the church tradition? Or is this a liberal, secular, modernist critique of Islam? So I want to know, am I debating or discussing with two Christians or two atheists or two liberal secularists? Like, that's a clarification that we need.
May I?
Yes.
This is a very important clarification, and there are a couple of distinctions that have to be made. One is all of your examples from Christianity are from Old Testament law, which if you had studied Christianity, you would know there's no sect of Christianity, no school of Christian thought, no tradition within Christianity that holds that Old Testament law applies to Christians for all time. As a matter of fact, it never did apply. Even in Judaism, after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, the rabbis redefined Judaism so that even they don't teach that those punishments have ongoing validity. So you're talking about something that nobody in mainstream Judaism or Christianity thinks is valid today versus something that unfortunately all too many Muslims do think is valid today. And the bringing up of ancient historical wrongdoing is all very well, and there's certainly a place for that. I've got no interest in denying any of the misdeeds of Christians throughout history. But the problem that we have in Islam is that these passages of the Quran that are problematic, passages of Muhammad's traditions that are problematic, they are still considered to be in force by very large numbers of Muslims, such that all the major terrorist groups around the world are Islamic groups. And you don't have any Christian terrorist groups saying Jesus is Lord and blowing people up. There's a reason for that. And the reasons have to do with the interpretative traditions in both religions.
Can I comment?
Yeah, go ahead,
Please.
Yeah, so I would ask Robert a very simple question that I think gets at what the real issue actually is. Do you believe that it's inherently immoral for an apostate to be put to death?
Do I believe that it's inherently immoral
Yes.
for an apostate to be put to death?
Is it inherently immoral?
Well, I know this is some kind of trap, but in any case,
No,
I don't
I'm just
see any
looking for
reason.
honesty on your part. That's all.
You can always have honesty on my part. Everything I tell you is the truth.
Okay, so go
and
ahead.
the fact is that, yeah, I don't know. I tell you the truth. I
You
haven't
don't know.
thought about
Wow.
it.
Okay,
But-
you haven't thought about it. Well, you're writing
Yeah.
all of these books on Islam
how are
talking
you
about
criticizing
apostasy,
Islam?
Right.
and you don't even know if this is inherently immoral. That's quite shocking,
No,
Robert.
I would say that I don't think that it's moral to put the apostate to death.
So it's
But
immoral.
as it comes to my books about Islam, I'm just reporting on what Islamic clerics and the Islamic tradition teaches about passages like when Muhammad says, if somebody changes his religion, kill him. So
Yeah, but
if you look, for example, in chapter 4, verse 89 of the Quran, in the critical Quran, where it says, if they turn renegade, then come and kill them wherever you find them, then I give Islamic authorities who actually say that this should be done. And that is something people need to know. Now, whether you're talking about in the ideal society, you have apostates put to death, I don't think so, because I believe in the freedom of conscience and the idea that of the dignity of the human person, which is a Christian concept that's not in Islam. You have in Islam, the unbelievers are the most vile of created beings, according to
Well, one
chapter
issue at a
98, verse
time.
6.
One issue at a
Yeah,
time.
So on. No, this
But
is all.
I still
let's
didn't
talk
get an
about
answer
this
if
issue.
it's
I understand, but this
inherently
is all the
immoral?
same issue. Whereas in
Is it
Christianity,
inherently immoral?
all people are equal in dignity as made in the image of God. And so in that sense, I would say, no, I don't think it is.
So is it inherently immoral, yes or no?
Can I answer that?
It is.
It is.
So when the Bible, when Deuteronomy, since you like to quote the Quran, when the Bible says this in Deuteronomy 13:6, if your brother, the son of your mother, your son of your daughter, the wife of your bosom, or your friend, who as your own soul secretly entices you, saying, quote, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near to you or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, you shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him or conceal him, but you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people, and you shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he sought to entice you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. So all Israel shall hear and fear, and not again do such wickedness as this among you. So let me finish. Let me comment on the passage. So when your loving God, Jesus Christ, who you believe is God, who revealed the Old Testament and revealed this as a law for the people, and you said that it's inherently immoral for the punishment of apostasy to be death, then you are charging your own God and supposedly loving Jesus with immorality.
Not
sir.
at all.
If you don't see that contradiction and hypocrisy,
it's not in the least.
Can't really do much for you.
Well, it's not in the least contradictory or hypocritical, because that is God actually ordering something directly.
Was God wrong for that?
Now, the question here is whether the Muslims, when they put people to death for apostasy today, are likewise authorized by God in some direct manner. Now, obviously,
that's what matters.
Yes, the question is...
Then it's not inherently immoral. It just matters what is the correct religion and whether or not God is actually revealing it.
Yeah, if you study the Old Testament, you will actually find that there's a great deal of discussion about passages like that, and whether they are actually commands by God, whether they were understood by the faithful, interpretations by the faithful. The evolving understanding in the Old Testament and the New, and in Jewish and Christian tradition, is something that unfortunately is absent in Islam, such that in Jewish and Christian tradition you have the understanding of the dignity of the human person that ultimately made people realize that putting people to death for apostasy was not something that was acceptable. Yeah. But the idea that it was a localized command at some point or understood to be such, that is not the same thing as people nowadays thinking they are the executors of the wrath of Allah because Muhammad says if anybody changes his religion, kill him, and the Quran says that you can soothe your heart by fighting the unbelievers and so on.
So Robert,
can we hear from Brother Rashid for one? Brother Rashid, go for it. What's on your mind?
Because this concerns me. Do you believe I should be put to death?
I believe that the punishment for apostasy in a correct Islamic state is death. I believe that that's the correct... Let me finish. Let me just respond, sir. I believe that that is the correct punishment which has been revealed by God both in the Quran and the Bible. And for Robert to turn around
I asked you...
Let me finish.
I asked you, do you believe I should be killed today?
And I answered you, sir.
Yes or no?
I answered you.
Yes or no?
I answered you.
I think he said yes.
You want me to answer?
I said.
Yeah, you answered me.
In a proper Islamic jurisprudence, jurisdiction, an Islamic nation, all of the laws of Islam and the Sharia as revealed by God should be applied.
So if we were in that kind of state, would you do it?
Including
I'm not the one that executes
with proper due process, with a proper court hearing, just like any nation of laws. The laws of the Sharia should be applied, including the death penalty for not only apostates, but also blasphemers.
You didn't answer me, yes or no?
We did answer
Yes,
you.
we did answer.
Yeah, so I should be killed.
We did answer
I
your question.
deserve to be killed because I left Islam and became a Christian.
According to Islamic law, an apostate like you would be killed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And according to the Bible
let me. This is a fallacy.
blasphemer.
This is a fallacy.
Robert,
too cocky. Like you want to say you have it too. It's a fallacy.
No.
Let us discuss this because
why is it a fallacy?
It's a fallacy.
Let
me finish.
Please condemn Jesus.
Yeah.
Please.
Oh, you think you
Condemn
should?
Jesus.
Robert
already
Okay,
condemned him. So
You're lying.
Let me
Let's
finish.
be on
Let me
record
finish.
saying you're lying
That's
about that.
Let me finish.
That's what happened.
Let's-
You said
let's-
eventually we realized you
You're lying.
Just let me finish. You
Let's hear
converted.
Brother Rashid, and then I'll come to you. Go for
You
it.
converted from Christianity to Islam. Your life is not under threat here in the U.S. I converted from Islam to Christianity. My life is under death. That's the difference between Christianity and Islam.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Yes.
I got a question for you guys. I'm a data guy. I'm a finance guy. How many Christians have died going from being Christian to Muslim? How many Muslims have actually been killed or died going from being a Muslim to a Christian?
There's no data on that because these kinds of things are not recorded. They're not considered crime.
There should be,
in
though, right? I
Islam.
mean, shouldn't there even if there's some stories to be able to say,
Yes.
you know, XYZ individual.
I have stories. I have one in Mauritania who was condemned to be executed. We just got him out to Paris because we negotiated with the government there. I have people right now in Libya. They are under death penalty in Libya. I have people who got killed in Jordan, for example, because I do my show. People contact me. I have people who got killed in Jordan. Their parents killed them because they became Christians from a Muslim background. We have people in different places in the world, in the Muslim community, they kill them, and if they get to flee, that's the best outcome.
I got a question. While I'm studying this, there's also Daniel said something very interesting where the guidelines of Quran is based on the jurisdiction of the government, meaning where you live, the religion is follow whatever the laws are of that nation. Meaning, you can correct me. I'm just giving you what I've looked into. Does this mean these rules apply no matter where you live? Is that across the board, or is it's more stricter in certain Muslim nations than other Christian nations?
Islam is to be applied forever on every place since the time of Muhammad until today. So Muslims are just seeking to be a majority one day, and if Muslims are majority today, these two brothers will witness my killing in front of people, and they will be happy cheering the crowds that I was killed. So Islam is to be.
If U.S. became majority Muslim today, you would be killed.
I will be killed. Sharia is to be applied everywhere, every time, and that's the biggest difference with Christianity, because Jesus came and he stopped the Old Testament. He stopped he didn't stone the lady who committed adultery. He said in the law, tooth for tooth, and he said, no, you turn the other cheek. Jesus stopped the Old Testament. They don't have a New Testament in Islam. They have worse than the Old Testament. They have something that Muhammad never corrected. So today we have to do jihad. Today we have to kill the apostate. Today we have to kill the person who doesn't pray, even a Muslim. If he stops praying, he should be killed. If he has no excuse, he should be killed according to Islam.
I'd like to give them a chance to respond. Daniel, what would you, because the point I think you were making was how that maybe doesn't apply based on what the countries are. And then he makes a good point about saying, but if U.S. eventually becomes majority Muslim, then that could be the criteria that we have to follow in U.S. What's your response to that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of inaccuracies in what he's talking about. I want to reframe the issue because he's saying that his life is in danger. But the lives of Muslims are in danger under a secular, liberal hegemony. And I know that some of the viewers might not be following what I'm discussing, but look at the war on terror, or even look at me personally, or Jake. But I say things that are contrary to liberalism. I critique and criticize liberal secularism. And what is liberal secularism? It's this philosophy that came out of the Enlightenment, out of the 18th and 19th century in Europe, and it was imposed on the entire globe by force through colonialism, through imperial wars. And the idea of liberal secularism is that morality should not be based on these old books like the Quran and the Bible. We have to use reason and science to maximize individual happiness, individual freedom, and equality. And this is the best system of life. It's an atheistic system of life. We need to have separation of church and state, etc. This is the dominant, I don't want to say religion, but it's a dominant ideology in the world today. And it's imposed through, the UN Security Council, international rights law, etc. But it's coming from a very specific philosophy that is anti-religion. It's anti-Islam, it's anti-Christianity, anti-traditional Christianity. I criticize this system. And Muslims who criticize this system are put on watch lists. We're banned from traveling. Some of us are drone striked. Some of us are detained. Some of us face all kinds of canceling, deplatforming. Our livelihoods are threatened. I get death threats all the time. Almost every day I'm getting a death threat because of my opposition to this hegemony, liberal secularism. There is no quote unquote freedom of religion, because if you oppose this hegemony, if you oppose this system, you will be put to death. And I know you've had some very distinguished guests like Glenn Greenwald, Whitney Webb, and they talk about this system. Alex Jones, they talk about this system. They might not put it in the same exact way that I'm putting it, but it is this authoritarian, centralized, theocratic, not theocratic, technological system. And yes, plenty of people are getting killed. What was the Iraq war about? What was the Afghanistan war about? How many millions of Muslims were killed because of those invasions? What were those invasions justified on the basis of? It wasn't on the basis of the Bible. I wouldn't put that on Christians. I would put it on spreading freedom, spreading democracy, spreading liberal values and quote unquote women's rights. That's what millions of Muslims in the past 20 years have been killed for, slaughtered, genocided because of this ideology. So yes, Muslims are under threat. Muslims are far more threat than, the few Christians here and there that might leave Islam to become Christian.
Go for it.
Well, in the first place, when it comes to secular liberalism, Daniel and I are completely in agreement. We're both against it. We both see that it's evil. And in that sense, you were talking about working together, finding common ground. That is the common ground that we have. The idea of the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan were completely wrong, based on false premises, false assumptions, based on the idea that they could bring democracy to the Islamic world. It was never going to happen. I was warning about it before it started, but was not heeded. But the fact is that, and also when it comes to death threats, we could probably have a contest and see, but I get them many daily, mostly from Muslims, but not always. And the left is increasingly unhinged and out of control. But if Daniel is positing that Islam is somehow the alternative, then I would wonder, how is it that all the Muslim politicians in the United States, including an obvious publicly Sharia adherent one like Ilhan Omar and Rashid Tlaib as well, Keith Ellison, the Andre Carson, the publicly Muslim Quran adherent politicians, and yet they're all very far on the left, and they're aiding this secular liberal monster that Daniel so rightly opposes. And so it's hard to see how Islam can be the remedy when you don't even have a single politician of the Islamic faith who is standing against all that.
Brother Rashid, what's your biggest criticism of, because you were a Muslim before and you converted. What was your biggest reasoning for doing so?
My biggest reasoning, and I want to comment on a point that I forgot to comment last time. Our brother, he said the 5% of Islam we're focusing on.
Right.
If you have this glass of water and you have 95 for it is water, but 5% is poison, it's going to kill you. So this is exactly what we have with Islam. Yes, you can talk about God, you can talk about worshiping, but how about violence against people like me? How about violence against Christians and Jews? You are ordered to wage war against them. That's what happened to my ancestors in Morocco. Berbers, they were Christians, they were executed, they were enslaved. That's what happened to people in Egypt, in Iraq, in Syria, and even in Europe. How about that? How about people who, for example, against women, Islam against women?
And we should note that they endorsed the death penalty for apostasy right here.
Yeah. Let me just finish.
As does Jesus Christ.
And against women, women should be beaten if they disobey their husbands. My mom was beating my imam dad. When I asked him why, he said, it's in the Quran. You cannot object to that. They cannot object to it. It's in the Quran. It should be applied. It's a permission for men to beat his wife. It's in the Quran. It's the word of Allah himself. Again, when I studied the life of Muhammad, in 10 years, he waged 83 wars in 10 years, 27 wars and 56 raids in 10 years. And you are going to teach me that Islam is peaceful? No, it's not peaceful. Are you going to give a Nobel Prize for somebody who waged 83 wars? No, you will not. And another thing, Muhammad is not a role model. Jesus is. Muhammad, he had many wives, 11 of them. One of them, she was 9 years old. He was 53. I am 50. I cannot marry a girl that has 9 years old. You cannot. That's abuse. And Muhammad did that.
Can we do one issue at a time?
Let me finish this. He took, so these are the rules that they want to apply today. If we criticize Muhammad, we should be killed. Like what happened with Charlie Hebdo. Do you think those people, they just killed the people who drew the caricature for Muhammad just because like that? No, because it's written in Islam that they should kill people who criticize Muhammad. So Islam is a big problem. Even the 5% can kill whole humanity.
Can I have a response?
Sure, please go for it, Jake.
And I want to comment on what he said and also Robert's remark about us endorsing the punishment for apostasy. Yes, we do. Why? Because our claim is that we are actually faithful to our scriptures. You guys are not. You want to avoid the Old Testament, and I want to give you an analogy, Patrick, because you're a business guy. You have many businesses, okay? And you have policies that you have to put in place based on social interaction in the workplace and all that kind of stuff. Now, you may make amendments to those policies based on new data, new information, how things are actually going based on those things that you put in place. Now, when you do, right, and this is the analogy between the Old Testament and the New Testament, are you willing to say that, well, yeah, thinking to myself, yeah, Pat, yeah, you were wrong, actually, when you said it was okay to do such and such. That was actually wrong, and you then put in the correct one. With the Bible, the problem that you have is the same one that you want to talk about, the loving Jesus Christ himself, which we also adore and respect as a prophet, is the same one that you believe is God and revealed the Old Testament. And you can't get out of that. So when your God, Jesus, revealed at that specific time, as I just read the passage, and I can read you plenty more, where he says to kill babies in war. Is it okay to target infants in war and kill babies? Is that inherently immoral? The problem that you have is if you go on, and this is why the argument is so important. It's not a tu quoque just as a fallacious argument. It's checking for your consistency as a Christian, whether or not you're actually faithful to your own text and tradition. And the reality is you're not. Why? You have two options. If you condemn it as inherently immoral, then the whole Bible's gone. Because if you believe that those verses in the Bible were revealed by God, then you're saying that God is immoral. And on the other hand, if you say that it's not inherently immoral, but God changed the law at this time, then most of your arguments lose the force that they have against Islam, because you can no longer argue that it is inherently immoral to punish an apostate by death and all of the other things that you want to tack on. This is why it's so important. It's not a fallacious argument, and the reality is we want to stick to our text and our tradition, and for the most part, we would argue that the Christians have abandoned them in favor of secular, liberal, moral ideologies.
Let me have Daniel respond, and then I'll come to you. Go for it.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that we need to respond to, because he's just listing every grievance that he has against Islam. Right. We have to take it step by step. But just on this point of violence, I think Jake makes really the crucial point. It's that Jesus, according to the Christian belief, Jesus is the God of the Old Testament. And he's the one who's commanding Moses, for example, to ethnically cleanse the Canaanites or the Amalekites or all of these other tribes, and to conduct conquest and war, to take girls as slaves, to take virgins as slaves. This is in the Old Testament, sure. So Christians have to deal with that moral problem. A lot of Christians, unfortunately, they just throw the Bible under the bus. And, how is that justified? But it's not just the Old Testament. It's also the New Testament. The New Testament also endorses slavery. The New Testament also has the book of Revelation where Jesus is going to come, which, by the way, Muslims also believe that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the born of the Virgin Mary, and he's going to come as the Messiah to establish God's kingdom on earth. Muslims also accept and believe that, and we're anticipating that. But he's going to be very violent. It's going to be a very violent affair, and that's in the Muslim tradition and the Hadith, and it's also in the book of Revelation. So Jesus is also very violent. And then finally, you have canon law. You have the church tradition. So if Robert wants to denounce canon law, because when you have canon law, it has slavery, it has a marriage age of 12 years old in canon law, it has punishments for blasphemy, it has even, striking the wife, the disobedient wife. That's found in canon law from Gratian. So I believe that Robert is an Orthodox Christian. If he wants to denounce canon law and denounce his own tradition, he can denounce that. He can denounce Jesus himself. He can denounce the Old Testament. He can denounce the Bible. The New Testament, that's fine. That's fine. He says that, our religion adapts. Our religion changes. But that's actually the problem, Patrick. When we're talking about wokeism, when we're talking about if you can say that, that's the Old Testament is for those times. It's not applicable now, right? That's the argument. The violence, the killing of blasphemers, that's for old times. We've changed, but Muslims are not willing to change. I say, yeah, Muslims are willing to stand by revelation. The problem with a lot of Christians, not all Christians, a lot of Christians, Jews, Hindus, they all have these practices in their books. Buddhists, they all have these practices, and they're pressured to change and update. And so why, if you can get rid of the conquest and the violence and the punishment for apostasy, why not just get rid of the prohibition of cross-dressing, the prohibition of homosexuality, the prohibition of drag queens? Why prohibit any of that? Maybe times are different. Maybe we need to adopt drag queen story hour in our church. Maybe we need to adopt, all of these woke practices. Why not?
And Robert, here's what I would say. You're making a very good argument, and I can totally feel where you're coming from as well. Obviously, just so everybody knows, have we ever had a conversation together prior to this debate? I just want everybody that's watching, have you and I ever spoken?
We just met a few minutes ago.
Have you and I ever spoken?
No.
Have you and I?
No.
I did that intentionally. I did that intentionally because I wanted to be the first interaction we have where it's not this topic, do you want this, do you want that? And nobody was given additional topics or what. You just kind of came in, we're going to talk, we're going to have this discussion. Again, I respect you guys for doing this. I think the part I agree with Daniel, and it could be a leak, it could be a flaw, or it could be a strength as well as the following. What I'm noticing between the two faiths is one seems to be more intolerant, and the other one's more tolerant. Let me unpack that from my perspective. For the longest time since I since I started praying September of 1997, I've prayed for four things: courage, wisdom, tolerance, understanding. The last 6 months, I've been having a hard time praying for the third thing, which is tolerance. And the reason for it is because I think Christians are becoming way too tolerant. Now, the standards could be extreme. Somebody could be watching and saying, guys, what are you talking about? You mean to tell me you're okay to hit your wife and do this and do that and apostasy and all this stuff? That's ridiculous for you to think that. And then you may say, well, look, we're at least staying committed to our faith. They're not. They're picking and choosing what they like, and they're not. That could be the argument. All I'm saying is that's their argument, what they're saying.
Yeah.
You are more tolerant of a religion when I say you're not representing everybody in a Christian. You could be your own kind of a Christian.
Yeah.
There's different, sects in a Christian. But from an outsider watching in and trying to be as fair as possible, I see we're not being tolerant. You're not going to say anything about our prophet. You're not going to say anything about our religion. We're going to defend this. These are our values. We're going to protect it. We're going to fight for it. This is important to us. This is our livelihood. This is what we stand for. And Christians are like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And then it's bringing out more flaws and arguments in the Christian religion. And I'm saying this as a Christian myself.